rest back up. Over here. Yep. And go in there.
Thank you, Anna.
So stand by. I'll get over here and I'll count you in. And I'm going to monitor your audio over here.
Perfect.
Rolling in 3, 2.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rich Simon. I'm editor of Psychotherapy Networker, and I am sitting here in the living room of someone who is known, I'm sure, to all of you, and I am having, in this moment, the Tony Robbins experience. We're about to start a conversation, and I'm about to ask all the questions that you therapists out there who will be watching this have always wanted to ask this man. And we'll see what he has to say, and also we'll have a close-up look, a close-up feel of what it's like to hang out with Tony for a bit and have this conversation. So I'm very much looking forward to it, and welcome to Networker Land.
Thank you, buddy. Good to see you, Rich.
Okay.
It's been a lot of years.
Yep. So let's start here. You have something in common with the people who are going to be listening to this interview and also seeing you at this year's Networker Symposium. We're all in the change business.
Yes.
We call what we do psychotherapy.
Yes.
You're careful to not call what you do, which is, we'll spend a lot of time here trying to define that and describe that, something else. The single term that you use most often is life coach. Mm-hmm. What's different about what you do? What are the similarities and differences between what you do and how you see psychotherapists operating?
I think there's a lot of different forms of psychotherapy, obviously. Dynamic psychotherapy, go back to Freud, Adler, Jung. It depends on what the style is, obviously. So, I've studied psychotherapy, obviously, and I find you can't possibly impact people if, first of all, what are we all in common doing? I don't think it's just change. I think we love human beings. I don't think you get into this business unless you have a true love for human beings, because you wouldn't want to sit and listen to all this bullshit unless you really cared. And so I have the reason I'm coming and I'm speaking for free and volunteering my time is I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I think most psychotherapists today understand that nobody has a complete lock on the human psyche, and there are many different approaches within psychotherapy. So there's many different approaches within psychology, whether it's cognitive or behavioral or somatic or psychotherapy or anything else you want to do. So what are the similarities? I think the similarities is I am unbelievably passionate and committed to producing change for people and helping them to end suffering and to experience a greater quality of life, which to me is life on their terms. Mine is not so much focused on healing all the wounds of their past, because frankly, you can spend your whole life doing it. And my experience has been that there's a usefulness in understanding that past and understanding how it frames their belief structures, how it frames their value systems. Which you do quite
regularly in your work. It's rare that you do one of your interventions at one of your events that you're not making some reference.
Yes, I have to, because you have to understand the context that brings someone to this moment. But I think the difference is kind of like Erickson. Erickson shifted from this person's focus is some tremendous, internal conflict that they have from their past to they're not getting married and what's preventing it, And sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Sometimes you're sitting there analyzing the past so much that you're not dealing with what's going on in the present. So I think you need both. But if there's a focus of mine, it's more on what do you do now to create a greater quality of life in the future, understanding the context. So sometimes there's a cognitive approach of shifting a belief structure. Sometimes it's really having them uncover what they value today, a value system change. Sometimes it's a neurological change. It's a form of conditioning. So it's like if I look at all the schools, say the 6 schools of psychology, I utilize all 6 of them. I stand on the shoulders of all the great leaders that I've learned from in those areas. And then just like if you're learning to play music, you first play everyone else's music, and then gradually, hopefully, you have a large enough base that now you can improvise and you bring you into it. So there's no way I could do what I do without all the understandings of all these different forms of psychotherapy. But I also have my own life experience, which comes from being with millions of people. I mean, I have 50 million people. And I'm very lucky. I live in a stage that some some of the greats that I've stood on couldn't do. I live in a place where I go to 15, 13 countries a year, some of them 2 and 3 times. I have audiences of 10,000 people, and I have the audience of 1. I work with the President of the United States, and then I work with a child. I work with a prisoner and a professional athlete. A Ray Dalio, like was here yesterday, one of the top financial guys on the earth, and then somebody who's struggling financially. So my work is designed to really look at how to help people in a pragmatic way to get what they want, but also to be fulfilled. I look at it this way. If there's a target for me, it's I want to help people experience life on their terms. An extraordinary quality of life is life on their terms. It's not my terms. It's not your terms. It's what do you want now at this stage of your life? And to me, that takes 2 skills, master skills. It's the science of achievement, which is a science. If you want to make money, I just spent 5 years interviewing 50 of the smartest financial people on the face of the earth, Warren Buffett, Carl Icahn, Ray Dalio, you name it, and I got their principles, their distinctions, and their strategies. And so if you apply those, it doesn't matter your gender, it doesn't matter your color, it doesn't matter your background, it doesn't matter your religion, you'll produce a result. Same thing with the body. We're all biochemically unique. But there are certain fundamental laws of the body. If you violate them, you're going to have disease, you're going to have a breakdown, you're going to have low energy. If you align with them, you're going to have great energy. But mastering the science of achievement, there will be individual skills in individual contexts. And I've done that by modeling, by finding people the best in the world and saying, what do you do? And then teaching it to myself and others. The second part, though, is really the art of fulfillment. And that, to me, is more important, and culturally, it's not reinforced. We're an achiever culture. We're a consumer culture, unfortunately. And so if you're going to have an extraordinary life, you have to understand the dynamic that we all have a 2-million-year-old brain, and that brain is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to make you survive. So it's always looking for what's wrong so you can fight it, flight it, or freeze. And what I really want to try to show people is how they can have this incredible life by really trading their expectations for appreciation. That when that gratitude or appreciation is there, as we all know, the 2 emotions that mess most people up are anger and fear. Those are the 2 extremes. And you can't be totally grateful and angry simultaneously, and you can't be fearful and feel grateful simultaneously. So gratitude is a part of that process. It's only one part, but it's an important part. And I try to bring people to the point where they're fulfilled where they are while they're pursuing what they want, as opposed to pursuing what I want, and if I achieve it, then I'm happy. I'm more into happily achieving.
So one of the things, as somebody who's watched your work, and one of the hallmarks of it is how rich this emotional environment is that you create.
Yes.
You're a very expressive guy.
Yes. And
so you feel, and part of your power, in addition to your mind works so quickly. Part of the power of you as a communicator is you're creating this environment where whatever's coming up, you're ready to respond to it, sometimes in very remarkable ways. What is it about your ability to get with people? I mean, I'm so struck when you do that intervention with Dawn, for example, in this documentary, I'm Not Your Guru. What is it that you do in your work with people that I would see as very intense therapeutic work, but you're not allowed, or you prefer another term for it, of coaching or whatever it is? What is it that therapists can learn from you about that ability to get with somebody, take in where they are, and take them to some other place based on where they want to go?
I think most great therapists already have that skill. I think it's what makes them great.
Yeah.
I know it sounds corny, but I really believe I teach all the coaches that I work with that love is the ultimate weapon, because you can pierce anything with it. And when people feel safe and when they feel that you truly love them, they will give you permission to do things that most people wouldn't do. I have a different philosophy. My philosophy is when a person comes and sits down, in the beginning of my practice, I think I took on what I called the impossibles. All the people have been in therapy for 7 years, 10 years, and I said, come see me, I'll have it in 1 hour. It's a little bit over.
You were thumbing your nose at the psychiatrist,
I really
psychologists who were saying...
Not so much the psychologists, because I felt like they were better, but the psychiatrist was just going to drug somebody.
They're higher in the arrogance department.
And never do this. It would make me so angry. So I challenged the psychiatrist, give me your worst patient, and I was able to do it. I took a lifetime
You're tired,
phobia.
you're poor, you're huddled masters. Yeah, okay.
But I take that person they treated for 7 years with, and I do it in 15 minutes and wipe the phobia out. So that kind of striking approach was there. But the biggest piece for me is a lot of therapists have been trained, depends on their style, but certainly in dynamic psychotherapy, Freudian psychology, you don't lead the patient. What the hell are they doing there in front of you? If you don't lead the patient, that's why it takes 8 years to get something done, or 5 years, or 2 years, or whatever the case may be. So my whole approach is, I need to find out who you are, what do you want, what do you need, what do you fear? I think life is the dance between what you desire most and fear most. And if I can expand what you desire, that hunger, and I can help you to eliminate or reduce that fear, then your life becomes bigger, richer, and more wide. And then my view is, I need to find what you want, not what I want, and then I need to find out what's preventing it and annihilate what's preventing it so that you're free to embrace all of who you are, getting rid of all those holdbacks that people have, all those inner conflicts that people have. But I don't believe it always has to be going back and rewiring everything. That's the difference.
What is so the thing that's remarkable, so lots of therapists might agree with what you're saying, you do it in 3 minutes in front of 3,000 people.
Yeah.
So what,
sometimes it's 2 hours, too.
And sometimes it doesn't work out. So we don't dwell on that too much. But to do it even once is quite remarkable, and it's something to shoot for. So what is it, as you're doing this, as you're entering, and I also, I really appreciate that you're saying it, there is a quality, it's palpable quality of love that can come across and work with, like our Dawn in your documentary. So what is it that accelerates this thing? That this process, that you're able to do something that we know that, yes, this is what psychotherapy is about. You're sort of like a psychotherapeutic superhero. You have this ability to leap tall bounds and do it in 2 minutes.
I feel like I've spent my whole life living. There's a great book that I'd recommend to every psychotherapist, and it'll give you a context. It's called The Talent Code. And it's about how...
Oh, yes, I know that.
Yes. And it's really about how the greatest, for example, athletes in the world that come from, like, I forgot the real number, but in one city in Russia, there's like 21 gold medalists.
That's right.
In this little tiny town, which is physiologically, historically
the tennis academy that sent all of the...
Exactly. Yeah. Or, Serena's one of my clients and her sister. You're like, how do you get, Serena's Venus in the same family? And what they found was there were several elements, but it was the building up of myelin. The building of myelin, that white matter in the brain that most people are familiar with. But, if you can imagine, if you do something over and over again, you build more myelin. It's like you might start with dial-up, but eventually you get to fiber, where things are so fast. Well, the whole 10,000 hours thing you've heard about, I don't know how true that is, but I've got more like 40,000 hours.
Well, you do that in a week, right?
Yeah,
it's the equivalent of it.
The number of hours and me putting myself on the line. The other part they found, though, that made them so amazing was that these people don't just practice. They practice at their edge. So, the President of the United States calls me, President Clinton, true story, and says, they're going to impeach me in the morning. What should I do? My first answer is, could you call me sooner? Right? But I
don't do this for any other president. Just that one, right? Okay.
But the point is, I figure it out, right? Because I have to. I'm on the edge. Or I stand up on a stage and boom, I call that person. They're suicidal. Knock on wood, I've never lost one suicide out of thousands. And as you know, Chloe's followed up 3 years later, 5 years later, to show people this isn't just a temporary fix. They really have changed their life. And so I've never lost one out of those thousands, but I'm online right now with somebody's life on the line. So when you're always practicing at your edge, you expand the myelin. And so now I have so much wiring that when you stand up, you only have probably 24 ways to be messed up, and I got 1 million ways to change you. And so I think that's the challenge for some therapists. They sit down and they've been trained and they care and they're committed and they have great rapport, but they buy into the limitation of the client instead of holding who they really are and annihilating anything that gets in that way. And then the other problem is, oftentimes they say a client's resistant. There's no such thing as a resistant client. Their client's just trying to preserve their mixed up values and belief structures, but underneath it, there's a part of them that knows what to do. My core belief is, I don't need to fix you. You are not broken. There's a part of you that's sad, a part of you hurt, a part of you feels betrayed. It'll probably always be there. I need to put a different part of you in charge. Every one of us has multiple personalities. And I can sit in here trying hours of fixing the bullshit of this one, or I can retire it and find another part of you that's in charge.
And you use that language all the time.
And that creates change so quickly, because instead of people leaving, I'm broken, I got to be fixed, and I need to do this for years, they go back and go, that part of me will always feel sorry for myself. I've outgrown it. That thing needs to retire, go to sleep.
But I have other parts.
Yes, and when you tap into those other parts, you remember Virginia Satir's like parts parties as an example, right? So I used to do that, but now I don't even do that. I just go, boom, let's find that part of you, and I call that part of them. But I can bring people there because I go there first. if you have not, you know, most therapists ask me, what's the best thing I can do for my practice? I say, transform yourself. Like, as great as your life is, take it to a next level. Find the area that you are not really mastering and go master it, because when you discipline yourself in an area, when you find a breakthrough in an area, you own it. So I can take you because I've been there. You can't touch someone if you've not been touched. You can't impact somebody if you've not been impacted. And if it's all in your head and you're just analyzing the person, people feel that. Versus if you go, oh, I get it, I've been there in a similar situation. Let me show you, let's do this together. There's a different level of trust. There's a different level of certainty. It's like if you look at an athlete, it's a perfect example. You know, I'm sure whether people follow sports or not, everyone has been watching a time when a kicker runs out on the football field or a basketball player to shoot a free throw, and you look at the kicker or the free throw shooter and you go, he's going to miss it. Yeah. How do you know that? You can see the lack of certainty, right? They have the skill. They're missing the certainty. Yeah. And so I produce that certainty along with the skill. And it takes both of those, because otherwise the mind can make up anything. I always tell people, it's not even your mind, it's the mind. When I ask people, name for me the two of the most stressful thoughts that you have regularly. You know, not once in a blue moon. And people have things like, well, I make enough money, you know, are my kids, are they taking good enough care of my kids? Does my husband or wife really feel totally loved? And what I show people is how many people in this room have this same thought. It's 99% of the room. It's not your thought. It's not even an original thought. If you're going to be stressed, you should have an original stressful thought, not what everybody else has. And I show people that it's really how the process of the mind. It's kind of like if I told you 100 years ago, we're going to the moon and back, you called me a lunatic. Now nobody uses that term because we've done it. Or if I said there's going to be a box in your pocket, and say 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, and you're going to pull it out
15 years
and you're going to push some buttons, and invisible waves are going around the earth, and they're going to come in this box,
out of the box
and they're going to show you this person. You'd say, oh, you're crazy. Thoughts are waves. And the way you change your experience of emotion is change the thought behind it. And the way you change the thought behind it, you can change the channel, which is your body. This is what I like to start with. It's kind of like if I want to watch, if I turn, you know, these invisible waves come to my TV, if I turn one channel, one physiology, it's all horror pictures. Turn another, it's all comedy. Turn another, it's all love. And so I'm really directed, another part that might be different is I really use physiology. I know that you cannot separate psychology and physiology. If you attack them both, you'll produce results 10 times faster. If you attack one or the other, it may happen.
In action right now.
I'm just passionate.
So you're a therapeutic, you know, you can look like a therapeutic natural.
Yes.
Let's slow it down a little bit.
Go for it.
For right now. What's the lineage? How does this all come together? So you've read all this stuff. You've remembered it all. I'm impressed with remembering the talent code and Virginia Satir and all your references thing. They still live inside you.
Sure.
So slow it back before all of this had integrated for you, before you became this force of nature. What was the challenge here? So part of it is, as you're saying, you did it a lot. You put yourself at the edge. Yeah. Were there in this lineage, are there particular role models, particular things that made a difference for you?
Yes.
And we'll get back to where you are now.
But
let's trace it.
No, I'd love to honor the people that have impacted
me.
It starts really with a love for people that I'm just kind of born with. I've always loved people, and I hate suffering. That's obvious because I grew up in a very tough environment. I have a younger brother, younger sister, 5 and 7 years younger, so I was kind of like the dad. I had four different fathers.
It was a tough family, yeah.
It was a tough family. My mom loved us, but she was addicted to alcohol and prescription drugs, and she went crazy. And I never even shared anything about it until about, I don't know, maybe 5 years after she passed, because I was with a group of kids that were part of domestic abuse. And I was telling them, you are not defined by these moments. Who you become today is not based on your past. Biography is not destiny. I'm watching their eyes, and I can see them going, bullshit, you know? Yeah. And so I finally just uncorked, and I said, let me tell you, because they see me as a tall, white guy who's doing well. And so I told them stories of my mom beating my head against the wall till I bled, or shooting liquid soap down my throat because she thought I was lying. I wasn't lying until I was vomiting. And this is the person I love most who's hurting me, and I know she loves me. So I think a huge part of what makes me effective is I had to separate early on that people aren't their behaviors. And it allowed me to have compassion for my mom even if she was hurting me.
Wow, okay.
And it then allowed me later in life, it doesn't matter what somebody does, I believe you can't influence somebody if you're judging them. And I believe interventions, therapeutic interventions, whatever you want to call them, are about influence. It's about understanding what somebody needs, what's preventing it, what's missing, and then using your influence to bring them new resources within themselves. They're already there. It's just finding where they are and reconnecting them to those answers, to those emotions, to those insights.
Did you see, so this came to you, this seems like an expression of who you are. Did you see this in action? You're not describing this kind of passionate intensity, does not, as we know, characterize most psychotherapy. Yeah. But where did you see this happening, or did you, this is your creation?
Well, I had to figure out, I became a practical psychologist at 7, 8, 9 years old.
Yeah.
Because in the way I would describe that, I didn't have the distinctions I have now, but the one thing I learned from her were triggers. I started to see that she was a different woman triggered by one environment, one situation, one tone of voice, one situation than another. And that instead of saying she was crazy, I started saying there are situations that trigger her. I need to understand those to prevent my brother and sister from being hurt and ideally prevent me from being hurt. And then gradually I started seeing patterns in that. And then, so by the time I was in junior high school, I was Mr. Solution. I wanted to read a book a day. I didn't do that. I took a speed reading class. But I read 700 books, in the area of human development, psychology, physiology over 7 years. And what I try to do from each one is learn from it and apply it. So the early days, I was, believe it or not, I was like in high school, I was 5'1" and fat. I'm 6'7". I tell people the difference.
It's hard to imagine, but
the difference is personal growth, right?
Yeah, we're fact-checking this with you.
It's a fact.
Sure
I actually had a tumor in my pituitary gland that made me grow 10 inches in a year. It's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is, I was Mr. Solution by that point because, like, if you had a problem, I wanted to help, and especially if you're a girl, I'm highly motivated. And then the people that influenced me in those early days the most was, started with like Emerson's essays and, Harry Lorraine memory courses and things like that. But gradually it started to move into Erickson, who was a huge influence on me, because I saw him as understanding that the unconscious of another human being could be easily influenced if you just didn't do the obvious. And I think the second piece was, and the one that probably influenced me the most, was Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl's work, and really studying that, because to me it's all about meaning. If we change the meaning, we change everything. Meaning equals emotion, and emotion equals life. If you say, what's the quality of your life? It's not your things, it's not your homes, it's not money, it's not even your kids. It's where do you live emotionally? And so there are people with billions of dollars.
Where do you focus?
Yeah, but there are people, but that's where you live emotionally. It starts with where you focus.
Yeah.
So, people billions of dollars and they're angry or miserable, then your life is angry and miserable. It doesn't have billions of dollars. You have 3 beautiful children that love you, a husband or wife that loves you, but you're worried all the time. The quality of your life is worry. It doesn't matter how much love you have.
What I'm getting from what you're saying, and I had seen this from watching you in action and reading some of the other stuff, that this reading is not just reading. This very
it's the hunt for answers.
A hunt for answers, and each of these books was a kind of an adventure for you.
It absolutely was.
And as you're describing them now, this is not something that got assigned you in a psychology class.
No. This is every day of my life.
So you didn't meet Erickson, and Viktor Frankl was not practicing, but somehow those principles, these guys who were saying something that seemed to be so at the core of human experience, you took that in, and then you try to find ways to implement it.
Correct. And then when I was really young, I was 23, I think, I got exposed to neurolinguistic programming, and I met John Grinder. And I just love John. I think he is a total genius still today. I think it was a combination. What he brought to me was physiology, because he was a former Special Forces guy, and he had a wickedly smart mind. I love wickedly smart people, and he's wickedly smart. And he just would not accept limitations.
A little more wickedly smart than John. We won't go there.
I don't think he was wickedly smart. He was more wicked.
Okay.
But I love Richard too. But I didn't learn from Richard. Later in life, I met Richard, and I got to meet Richard. But I met them after they split. And John became a role model to me because he had such certainty and intensity, and I watched him do this magic, and he was such an elegant man. I don't have half his elegance, but his skill was unbelievable. But he would leave the room, and then something would happen, and that's how I got good, is like somebody got up and they started having, whatever term you want to give it, double dissociation, multiple, phobic response,
some phenomenon. Yeah.
And everybody's, oh my God, this is what's happening. Everybody's freaking out. And I just got up and handled it, right? And then John came back and saw that, said, what the hell happened? This new kid just did this.
And you were in your 20s.
Yes, and I was the only person not a therapist in the room, because in those days, they only trained therapists. I basically convinced John to get me in the room by total persistence and basically pushing and haggling and teasing. And so early on, I saw the power of those skills. And what was different was I just I wouldn't accept limitation. I still believe you get what you tolerate. I think as a therapist, you have to understand the results you're getting are what you're willing to tolerate in that individual. That if you are loving them enough and you're operating truly in their best interest, you can't accept the limitations because they're already accepting them. They're not healthy enough to make the change. You have to take them there. But to take them there, you got to take you there.
So this voice, this guy,
yes,
the power of this is in the books. This is in all that you do. Where did you see this in the world? Was there a model? Was there somebody who embodied these qualities that you're describing with such passion for us right now?
And I want to answer that clearly. You know, John had it differently. If you met John, he was very different to me. This
is not John. That's not his style.
And John, and my original teacher was Jim Rohn, a personal development speaker, and he's got a really, you know, everything he does is programmed. It's beautiful. He's a philosopher more. And what I saw was I saw that some people were more philosophy-driven. I saw that as beautiful, and some more strategy-driven. And I think you need both. You need strategy to figure out the how-to, but you need philosophy to figure out the why-to and to have a fulfilling life. So I pulled from multiple places.
But this passion that you have...
That's just me.
That's just... Okay.
That's something you'll learn.
Yeah.
Well, I think this passion is coming from, I love to light people up, and I have such an intensity in me of not accepting limitation.
So this was your style from the beginning, from your motivational speaker, from the teenage guy who would go around living in the car.
I became student vice president of my high school. I was not a popular kid. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I didn't kiss anybody's butt. I was 5'1". I was not dynamic. But I was dynamic in my passion. And I think, and I wanted to help people even then. I mean, all summer long, I took the entire leadership class. There was no time off. And every single day, 5 days a week, we met to do things to improve the school for the entire summer. I've always been this crazy, if that's what you're on to. This is not the result of education. This is poor nature, I think. I think it's my nature. But I think that this nature was refined by seeing that I could make a difference to my brother and sister initially. I could make a difference for myself, that I could get my mom sane again, which not only protected me, I wanted her to be happy, you know, and then figuring out inside of me, you know, what have I learned from all this? Who have I become? I had to grow up pretty quick. And then another stage of life came, and I married a woman 13 years my senior, and she'd been married twice before and had kids from both parents, both husbands. So instantly, I adopted her kids. So I was 24 and had a 17-year-old son who was a drug addict, an 11-year-old daughter, a 5-year-old son.
Welcome to parenting there. Okay.
But it hit me all at once, right? And my kid is like practically my age, you know, it was a good experience. And so I experienced another set of dynamics there of how do I make a difference with these children? You know, I had this outside, I'm going to change the world mode, but how do I do this here? So all those life experiences, then taking on businesses, and then learning how to grow a business and how to make it through businesses in an industry that was really underdeveloped and undeveloped. And then expanding. I have 33 companies now. This year we'll break $6 billion in sales. So I've had to learn how to do this in business, in finance, in relationships, in emotions, and so I love the breadth of where I can have an impact.
And it's breathtaking. And also, just go back a little bit. So you're describing this passionate need to do good in the world, and respond to people's suffering, and to move beyond the kind of the narrow way most people have defined their lives. That has some challenges there. So what have you learned? Because I imagine as a younger man, this is with this whole realm of you know, kind of what we in the trade call transference and countertransference. The therapist working too hard. The therapist wants it more than the client. So was that a challenge for you? And how did you handle the challenge at these early stages where you were filled with all this energy and enthusiasm?
I just operated from a different belief. I believe in transference, obviously emotional transference. Someone fall in love with you because you're helping them change their life and that kind of thing. Obviously that part. But the idea that I want it more than you, I think is bullshit. I think people want it, if they're in your fucking presence, excuse my French, but it's true, that's how strongly I feel about it, then they're ready to change. It's your failure that's not getting through to them. And because I hold that as the absolute truth of myself, I'm not willing to point to them as the problem. If they're in my presence, they want it. They may not want it, you know, like part of them wants it, or they wouldn't be there. Part of them doesn't want it. We all know the difference between the conflicts of the conscious and the unconscious. But that's my job to get them through there. But if I've operated from the belief that, well, maybe I want it more than they do, and I'm all that is more psycho bullshit as far as I'm concerned. It's something that's been passed on. You got to remember, much of what's happening in psychotherapy is identical to what was in 1950, what was the year, or 1859 when the talk approach was generated, right?
Okay.
I mean, I think it was 1895. 1895 is when he generated the talk therapy, right? When Freud did that. There are people still doing the same freaking thing. If I would have told you that you're going to be holding the same phone as 10 years ago, you'd laugh at me. We need to update the software. We need to update the rules. And so what's happened is tradition keeps passing on because that's what institutions do. And I think psychotherapists today are hungry for more tools. They're becoming coaches.
And that's why we're having Tony Robbins coming to our symposium.
Well, I'm thrilled to come. I don't pretend to have the answers. I hope the people watching don't think I got the answers. I have one style. It's not right for everybody. But my style is take no prisoners. There are no excuses. 100% responsibility for getting the impact in that individual because I know I can get them there because they want it.
But where's the challenge? So all of that makes perfect sense to me. At a personal level, at some point, you have an amazing ability. These stories you have about Colonel Sanders, who I didn't realize was such a heroic figure, and his 1,009 attempts to sell his chicken recipe.
2 years living in this car.
So what was the point of challenge when you became this helper on this wide stage, when you became whatever you were calling yourself, this coach, who was so intensely involved in people's lives and refuses to say, this is my limitation, or it's resistance, or it's the client's fault? What challenges have you felt that you kind of had to find a way to regulate that energy a bit or redirect it?
What kind of challenge?
Challenge where you weren't being effective and you couldn't figure out why, where people were wanting so much of you, they were getting really close to you in a way that wasn't helpful for them, began to see you as the thing you say you're not, the guru. All the different ways in which someone who transmits the kind of message you do, especially with large groups of people, but I'm talking more about earlier stages in your career, where it was challenging. You felt like, I'm not having the results I would want to have. I haven't been able to figure it out. Did somebody help you figure it out? Or did you have a capacity to stand back from things and reflect?
Well, I have a practice that I've done my entire career, and it sounds absurd, but my team will tell you it's an absolute fact. Every break, which there aren't many at my events.
I know.
From 8:30 in the morning to midnight.
I can testify.
I was just doing an event in Australia, got back from 2 days ago, and I was on stage 16 and a half hours. Anyone can vote with their feet and leave and get their money back. It was the third day of the event. I was on stage at 9:30. I finished at 2:30 in the morning. We had one 1 hour break. No one leaves the room, and it's a stadium with 10,000 people, to give you an idea. So I have an ability to sustain, but at the break, my point is, and in that case, there was a break at lunch, which was really dinner, like 7 p.m., and there was a break at 2:30 in the morning. I'm exhausted, but what's the first thing I do? My team's there, we pull up the tape recorder, what's everything that worked? And I dig through and find everything that worked, and then sometimes, you don't know how you made it work. Sometimes it's your unconscious, right? You can be unconsciously competent.
Most of the time,
But I want to bring that into conscious competence so I can teach someone else and so that I can consciously do it again. So I pull out, okay, here's what I did, and then I decipher, here's what I did that intervention, here's what there, so that Chloe and others will know, if they decide to make film of it, but also so they see the patterns, and so I see the patterns. And then I go, what didn't work? What could have been better, faster, quicker? What could have been more enjoyable for people? Because I also have to entertain people simultaneously. I can't just do the therapy. I got to keep 10,000 other people for 12, 13, 14 hours completely connected and absorbed in the situation with somebody that they might roll their eyes. I mean, one of the things I'm most proud of is I create a community where some young guy, who maybe at this stage is not well developed in his empathy, will sit there and cheer for a woman who's 70 pounds overweight that he would normally not even talk to, and literally for hours be there for her. That transformation of the group happens. So I'm looking at not only what do I do well, what's the intervention, but how do I keep the audience engaged?
2 levels.
So they can also get the transformation by watching the person, just like watching a movie, right? So what worked, what didn't work, what needs to be improved. I've been doing that for 40 years. So at this point, I could be an idiot, and I have to see there are patterns that make you angry, sad, worried, depressed. There are patterns that make you gracious and generous and playful and fun and passionate. And so I know what those patterns are. So in the early days, though, I'd say here were the stages. Stage 1 was, what the hell do I even call myself? I'm doing this stuff, and I was doing one-on-one interventions and coaching sessions, and there were no coaches. There was no term of art like coaches. And people started to call me a guru, and I hated that, or a motivator. I've never been a motivator. I believe in energy. I believe in passion. You can feel that. But passion without strategy is like a chicken with a head cut off. I've never been anything more than a strategist. But I know how to produce energy. Because without the energy, you don't apply it. So, so I said, I'm a coach. Because I said, I've had great coaches in my career as an athlete. I was a strong athlete, but I was better than some of my coaches.
What was your sport?
Basketball, football, and baseball. But I was better than a lot of my coaches, but they were a better coach. So it wasn't they were better than me, and I'm not better than anybody else, so I like that. I love my coaches. They loved me.
So you learned a lot from your athletic coaches.
I did.
To begin with.
And then it was the right metaphor for me because I was like, I'm not better than anybody else, but my coaches could see what I couldn't see because I was in the forest, right? And so that became my operating metaphor. And then I was coach. And then about, I don't know, it was when Clinton first came into office, and the word got out I was coaching him. And Larry King had me on, and one of the things he says, what is this thing you're a coach? You're not a coach. You don't coach sports teams. I said, well, I actually do coach sports teams. I have 3 NBA championship rings right now from different NBA basketball teams I've coached. But I said, you're right, that's not all I do. And I tried to explain what coaching was. And I was so tired of explaining myself, I was about to give it up, and about next 2 months, 3 months, everybody was a coach. It's like therapists started calling themselves coaches, financial people became coaches. So I went through that first stage of just, I wasn't a therapist, I wasn't looking for insurance. I'm just gonna produce a result and you only pay me for the result. If I don't produce a result, you pay nothing. That's how I built my brand.
That's a radical shift.
And then I did that with sports. I said, you pay me nothing unless I produce a result. And sports brought popularity to me because then instead of being weird therapeutic stuff, people went, wow, he turned around the Kings, they're in last place, they went to the Stanley Cup, and they all said Tony was the source. That began to expand my brand so I could help more people. So I don't think it was so much a conflict of figuring it out. It was a conflict of creating a brand that I could reach the people I wanted to reach. And then I did these silly infomercials. I hated infomercials. I didn't want to do infomercials. But I watched these horrible infomercials telling people get rich by doing nothing. And I thought, if I had the President of the United States, if I had Andre Agassi, if I had this list of who's who people not being paid on a show saying this guy's the real thing, and I put out a great product, hopefully that'll expand my brand and I can reach more people.
I think it worked.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is it was less figuring out. I had moments, I remember I did a guest event one time in Vancouver, and I was used to just grab somebody out of the audience. Who's got a real problem? I'm going to handle it right here, right now. And this person really resisted coming up, and people around them volunteered them, and I grabbed them, brought them on stage. And I think it was a free guest event for 2,000 people. And I would demonstrate my skills so that people then come spend 3 days with me. And I was there, and an hour went by, and I would normally be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and I was sweating. I tried something else because they weren't committed, and that whole thing, they weren't committed. But what I realized at the end of it, when there were probably 300 people left in the room, I figured it out. And I was like, this can never happen again. What am I missing? And I realized I was missing leverage. Leverage is one of the keys to what I do. I have to my first approach, you can use any technique. Any psychotherapeutic technique, any cognitive technique, any behavioral technique. The techniques to me matter less because there's a million of them. What I'm looking for is the process of change. So I look at it in these steps. First, I got to identify, understand, and most importantly, appreciate. So I'm not just evaluating you. Appreciate your model of the world. How do you look at life? What do you value? What do you fear? What do you excite you? Where are your conflicts? What do you want and what's in the way? And then once I really know and understand and appreciate your model of the world, now what I got to do is I got to find leverage. I got to find a way to make change a must for you, not in my mind, in your mind. For some people, trying to make it a must, they'd rather die than do what you tell them to do. But everyone has a trigger. Everybody, I had a woman once, I'll give you an example. She's a total vegan, and she had real health problems because while she was eating well, her psychological and emotional world was producing just massive stress, and she was really ill. And so I was trying to show her how to make some of these changes in her value system so that her decision-making would change, and her body would change, and her joy would change, her happiness would change, everything else. And we had it right there. And you're handling what people would call resistance, what I would call is internal conflict. And she's like, well, nothing's working. So I look for leverage. What's going to make her change? So I say, how long do you think a person who's going to live this way is going to live? I don't say, you're going to die. I'd never do that. That's, first of all, that would have no integrity.
You're inviting her into an outlook on her life.
And then so she tells me 37. And I say, how old are you? She says 34. And she still didn't change. I'm going to die in 3 years. I'm still going to change. So finally I said, well, how will your daughter feel when she's carrying your coffin? Knowing you could have changed. You knew what to do, but you just kept saying you couldn't do it. It still didn't work. She goes, she'll probably cry. And she started crying thinking about it, but, you know, I can't change. And so there was a moment in my head where it's like, this one, nothing's going to change. And I always discipline myself. There's only a few times in my life because that was one of them. I was like, damn it, there's still a damn way. And so I finally thought for a moment. I talked to her and I said, how are you going to feel if her new mother's a meat eater? She went absolutely crazy. This is bullshit. She changed everything because I found what that trigger was. I found
and you had somehow entered into her world that you could come up with something. I don't think many people listening to that would have come up with that particular intervention.
But it's finding that leverage that makes change a must for them.
For them.
Not what makes it for you. Because what will work for you and what will work for me, you know, we're similar guys, but it's still going to be different, right?
Right.
But for some people, it's radically different. And when I discovered how to get leverage, when change is a must and you put all the resources of a human being towards changing, it's not that hard to change. I always tell people change is a matter of drive. It's a matter of motive or motivation. It's not a matter of skill.
Yep.
You know, if you get the person wanting it bad, if I put a gun to your head and say, I'm going to kill you and your children tomorrow morning if you don't stop smoking, amazing, you will find the willpower to do it.
Yep.
It's like you haven't found the right reasons. You haven't found the right emotions. You haven't found the context within yourself or the part of you that can make that change.
Yep. So you go to that place, what you're describing and not only describing, but you're demonstrating and embodying right now, is a way of kind of getting to the heart of the matter.
Yes.
And what something that you said earlier, which sounds like something that people might say, do you actually see it in observing their behavior? There's this palpable quality of, and I don't know if this is with everybody you work with, but in these moments that are extremely effective in your intervention, especially in the I am not a guru thing, that quality that of love.
Yes.
Like you feel like these complete strangers matter to you.
They do.
Intimately.
They do.
Yeah. So it's not just pretend. It's sort of like whatever skepticism I might have of Tony Robbins, infomercial, this, you know, the
20 years
empire.
ago, by the way.
Okay.
But people get stuck in their heads.
I got to needle you a little bit about that. But whatever image I have, when I see you in that moment, I have no resistance to that whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's just...
And that's what my audience is.
But you're telling us that's there for you. That's some of the legacy of who you are and how you grew up.
Who I am, even before I grew up, my growing up probably augmented my hate of suffering and my desire to help anyone I can. At this stage of my life, obviously, I don't have to work, and I haven't worked for 15 years, and I work harder today than I did when I had to work, you know? It's just so fulfilling. What else are you going to do with your life? But I think, you know, there's a scene in that documentary, if somebody's watched it, that I didn't want in there, but it wasn't my film, right? And Joe Berlinger, the founder of that, by the way, has made these documentaries. I was a fan of his work. I met him at a party. And
usually they're exposés. They're not.
They're definitely. He's known for just ripping people apart. Some people are disappointed when they watch my film. Where's the rip-up of Tony?
Because he loves you. You know, he just sort of embraced you.
But he didn't know me.
Yeah.
I met him, and he made a film that some people know about where he saved a couple of men that were on death row who were in. You know, they weren't guilty.
Yeah.
It took him a decade to do what he pulled off. If I had done that, the level of fulfillment of saving a life to me, I've unfortunately saved a lot of lives, people who are suicidal specifically. To me, that's the most fulfilling thing in life. And I met this man, and he was not fulfilled at all. I could feel it. And so I invited him to come to my events, and he told me later on, he goes, my wife said...
This is a man you worked with at...
Who made the documentary on this. So I'm giving you a background so you understand. And so he was not a fan, and there was something in it. He said, his wife said, you never take 6 days off in your life. She goes, something about this guy impacted you for even doing this. He gets to Palm Springs, where it was in those days. And he told me all this later. He goes, the first 2 hours, people are having a good time and they're sharing personal stuff. And he's New York. He said, I'm a New York Jew, and we don't do that stuff.
What am I doing here?
Yeah, what am I doing here? And he goes, I was looking to bolt, and he said, I called my wife at the break and said, this guy's so nice. And he invited me. How do I get out of this shit? Right. And she said, honey,
I remember this.
You said that you wanted to go. Why don't you stay through the night? And by the end of the night, he had this huge breakthrough. So he convinced me to do this film. I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to interrupt my own audience. So it took him 2 years to convince me.
That's right.
But the value it gave me in the film, I think, that people see, that I didn't want people to see, is there's when I worked with Don, I think it was, afterwards, I gave him full pass. And so the people closed the doors, because when I'm done, you see me out there, and then I go and kind of collapse emotionally, like I feel what they felt. I can't feel it when I'm with her, because I can't help her if I'm so empathetic. I feel the empathy, but if I let it overwhelm me, I'll just be sitting.
He interviewed you, and that was...
Yeah, and he burst through the doors and he said, Tony gave me permission to anything. You didn't let my team through, and I'm sitting there crying.
Yeah.
And you can see that's why I'm effective, because I care that fucking much.
Yep.
And so that's the truth. I just care that much. I don't care who it is.
Yep.
And when you care that much, and I've got 40 years of learnings, I haven't stopped learning. You know, it's pretty hard not to be able to help at that
So
stage.
in recent years, so you went through and you've written about this a great deal. What's the new learning here at this stage of the game for you?
Well, to me, it's all...
What's the challenge? Let me
Yep.
get back to my challenge question, because I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And what might be a challenge for even for you with the attitude you're describing, and what's the learning?
Time is the biggest challenge, because there's only so many hours in the day, and I have very high desires of impact in lots of areas of life. I have companies I run, the impact I do outside of therapeutic interventions. But I would say probably the only area that I still don't feel like I'm as strong as I want to be, and I'm still improving, is around death. And I think that's because it's my own issue. I think, you know, when someone has a loss of that nature, you know, I've buried, you know, 3 fathers and a mother. I've been through all those experiences. They've certainly transformed me in many ways, and beautiful ways too. And I see the value of death, but it's just like I want to do more in that area. And some of that is not doing. Some of that is life experience. It's a stage of life that people have to go through and learn how to deal with. But I would love to be able to do that quicker, faster, more. And that's a subject that I have difficulty doing. I don't feel like I'm masterful in that particular area. I'm good, but I'm not as great as I want to be. And so I'm still pursuing those understandings. And part of that is my own understandings of what that looks like, what death is, and your own mortality and things of that nature. So I think I'm still learning that area. It's not like, can I turn somebody's economics around? Can I turn their business around? Can I turn somebody around? You know, I can do that with my eyes closed. What's fun is the art of doing it differently every time. Right? That's the beauty of it.
Yep.
And the art of them finding the way to do it, so they know it's them, not me, so they're not dependent. That's the art of it now. So the challenge is the art, doing it differently, having fun with it. But I would say, you know, death, loss of those they love, somebody has cancer, things of that nature, I can help. I'd like to be able to help more, and, you know, I'm not there yet.
Interesting. So let's just pause for a moment. It's really that's very touching to hear you talk about it that way. So, you know, we'll be hearing more from you about aging, and you'll help many of us, I'm sure, on that path and with its inevitable destination. So
Yes, of course.
So there's more to be heard from you on that score, I'm sure. So when you look,
I just want to mention that some people I'm learning from now are outside my realm of what I would normally look at too. Tony Bossis at NYU does these studies where he says none of us know how to die. No one shows us how to do this. And they're doing this work now with psychedelics, where they're taking people today who are terminally ill and have the level of anxiety about it. Like some people are prepared for death, or relatively prepared for death, or their family is. These are people that are the most extreme. And so NYU puts them through a process, a double-blind study, and they use psilocybin. And one session, these people lose their fear. Like he told me about this woman, it was amazing. He showed me a video of her. And he goes, this woman is not just an atheist. She's not a California atheist who still thinks there's water and air that's nicer. He said, she's a New York atheist. Like, there is no God. There's no form of God. And she goes through this little session at the end, tears streaming down her face, and she's saying, I've experienced God for the first time. I have no fear of death. I know this is not the end. And I just think the work that they're doing, and they're doing that at Johns Hopkins now and a couple other places. There's a gentleman at UCLA doing it. I think the experience of, you know, a drug is something somebody takes over and over and over again to try and get a result. These are one-time experiences where the brain gets rewired and connected to something greater than our current perceptual abilities. And I'm fascinated by that. And I'm just fascinated, you know, like, you know, the Book of the Living Dead, you know, that's done. I'm fascinated by looking in the Tibetan book at the different ways in which people are looking into what the next level of the adventure is. I think that's probably for me the next mystery I don't know if I'll be able to solve, but hopefully I'll be able to appreciate and understand even more.
I'm having this image in my head of, you know, the Tony Robbins event is so deeply alive, and it's filled with music and possibility, and you can do it. And let me just dive in here. And you, as usual, you've anticipated me, because I was thinking kind of what's the next challenge for you, and what's the next step, and what are people looking for? So you've charted this whole, as I guess as well as anybody has, the kind of the map of success and fulfillment, and you've done some great work in that regard and reached a lot of people. And what are we dealing with? And what are the boomers?
Yes.
And
I'm the youngest of the boomers, so I have most of my dearest friends are 17, 18 years my senior by their nature, because I've always believed that anticipation is power. If you play a video game against a child, it's quite humiliating. They always win. It's not because they're faster and smarter and quicker. It's because they played this game before a million times. They know the first bad guy's here, the next bad guy's here. You go and you get shot in 5 seconds. And so I'm always trying to know the road ahead. And so my dearest friends are some of the most successful people in the world, not only in business, but I think emotionally, spiritually, in their contributions to society. And so I've always had to look at the road ahead because I see what they're experiencing. I hear it. They want me to coach them, and in coaching them, I'm learning. I'm not dumb enough to think I'm the one with all the answers. Sure, I can coach on what I know, but I'm trying to learn. And so I see what they're going through, and it's making me anticipate it. It's making me look at how will I handle that? Because I'm only 57, but I'll snap my fingers and I'll be 67. I'll snap it again. I'll be 77. Before you know it, you'll be, if you're lucky, in your 80s or 90s, right? So I want to help people in that area, and I'm in my infancy in that area.
Yes. So so what you've communicated so strongly in this conversation today, and all your work, is this passion, this sense of possibility, this unbelievable level of energy that I'm experiencing right now, and I probably won't be able to go to sleep.
That doesn't just come from passion, though, too. I want people to know it's like if you saw, it's daily practices. Yeah. The way I start my day, what I do to prime my brain before I start, what I do to get my body ready. My trainer was just interviewed by Business Insider or somebody, and he's trained 4 or 5 of the greatest boxing athletes in the world, some of the greatest football, baseball players. And he told them flat out, he goes, no one I've ever trained with trains harder than Tony. He said there's zero exaggeration. He does more for his mind and body than anybody I've ever worked with in my life. Yep. That's how I get up and do 50 hours in a weekend and hold 10,000 or 14,000 people and have them have an impact. Is because it's what I'm trying to say to the therapists that are out there, if they're watching, is I have an affection for you, even though I don't know you, because I feel like we're on the same path. I know I come in a weird package, and I'm very intense and passionate, and yours might be more gentle. But I think we're trying to do the same thing. But we love people, and we want to help people, and we all have different skills to offer. And really, what I'm just trying to say is, don't settle, and the fastest way not to settle with your clients is don't settle with you. It's like, go to work harder on yourself than you do your clients. If you can keep growing leaps and bounds, you can take anyone there. But if you're doing okay and you're doing good in your life, you're not going to take anybody to greatness. And I think oftentimes who we spend time with is who we become. And the tough part is, if you're dealing with people all day long on their worst parts of their life, you kind of get pulled into it. It's like a police officer. I donate all kinds of money, time, energy, and resources to police officers and firemen. But police officers, even more than firemen for me, because they see the worst side of human beings and they start thinking that's all there is, because there's so much of it. And so I want them to have the joy back of remembering that not everybody's like that, and that human beings, when they get fearful, when they get angry, when they get crazy, yes, this is how they operate. And so I guess my message is, I'm coming to visit. I have no time in my life. You've offered, you're a friend, we've been friends for decades. I'm there. And my real reason there is to try and serve. But I hope people know when I'm coming, I'm not coming to tell you what the hell to do like I have all the answers. I'm coming to show you a little bit of what I know. And anything you teach me about death, I'm in. I'm sure you all have great tools and resources. But I'm going to be most impressed, not what you can tell me, but what you've lived. The reason I can move people is because I live it. I am fit. I am strong. I am incredibly happy with my wife. I am successful in business. So I know what to do. It's not bullshit. It's not a story. The biggest problem with coaching, I created this frickin' industry, and now it's like a bastard child to me because I did it based on results. They do it because they went to a little class and they get a little trophy and a little chart, signed by somebody. That doesn't mean squat. I want to see you produce the results in your own life. And then I know you can take other people there as well. That's what I hope that people will take home, because everybody there who's working so hard to help others, they got to take care of themselves too, for their own benefit, for their family's benefit. So I'm coming not so much to teach you, but maybe to give you an experience that'll help you so that you can continue to enjoy your life even more, grow more, succeed more. And then I'll give you my 2 cents, which is probably all it's worth, about how to do it.
Okay. You've been generous with your time. We're coming to a close here. Last question. So we live at this time, as we all know, of incredible polarization in our society. There's a kind of a level viciousness in our public discourse. There's a whole confusion about values, and there's a sense of a deep division in the society of people who with different outlooks, different fundamental models of the world. What's your recommendation, or what's your thoughts as therapists, mental health professionals? What role, if any, do we have in trying to make an impact on that awful situation? And if there's something in particular that you guys have, that you're up to, that would be interesting. But what is it? What are your thoughts for therapists about that?
Well, let's start at, like, President Trump. I know him very well, and I
He's your neighbor.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
Just down the street.
All right. Well, I don't
I've known
know
him for a lot of decades. I gave him his first big talk. He thought he was coming to 200 people, and it was 10,000. So then he got kind of hooked on those big speeches.
Right,
so
it's your fault.
Fortunately or unfortunately, right? Depends on your point of view.
You're to blame.
But I'm also, I know Hillary very well as well. So, I was in an event in San Jose with 10,000 people the day after the election in, Northern California, highly Democratic, and people were like depressed. And I said, what is this bullshit? I said, you guys are giving your power of everything in your life down to whether or not the person who's the President of the United States shares your values or not, or has an effective style. He clearly has an ineffective style for a chunk of the society or the world. He's very arrogant. And I still know him, and I still respect what he's done in some aspects of his business. I don't like what he's done in his communication style at all. I think he gets in his own way. So I agree with most people at that. But that has nothing to do with where our society is going to go. We've always had conflicts. The difference is now we think if someone has a different point of view of us, they should be shut down. And you go look at Berkeley, and people are the place of free speech, and they're rioting and destroying things. Supposedly people that are supposed to be free speech advocates because they don't agree with who's being up there and speaking. We have a whole generation that's been taught that if they fail, they should still have a trophy, that they need to be in a safe place, that words are going to harm them. I think it's the biggest bullshit in the world. I think as therapists, you can't tolerate it. When you see people making their world upside down and so negative, but of course you can't do that if you're doing it yourself. And that's what most people are doing. I don't participate in that. This guy's the President of the United States. Do I like his style or approach? No. But it takes a Congress and a Senate. It takes everybody. And there's a reason why he got elected. He got elected because the other party didn't pay attention to a whole segment of the population. But generalizing everybody as being, homophobic or, every word you want to use from whatever attribution you want, that is just schoolyard bullshit. I won't tolerate it in people. And if you want to work with me, I'm not going to tolerate it for 2 seconds. I'm not here to tell you what to believe politically. I think there's all kinds of inequalities in the world, and I believe we should work to solve them. I mean, I'm feeding 100 million people a year. That's a fact. The last 3 years, I've fed 100 million people each year, 300 million people. I'm going to feed 1 billion people over the next 7 years. So I give a shit. And I not just give a shit with my words, with my money, with my time, with my energy, with my effort. Somebody fed my family, I want to feed others, and I've got a game plan of how to do that. But I say that because if you're so focused on what's wrong, you can't be part of the solution. You are part of the problem. And I think therapists are just humans, and very often they get caught up in the story. And I say, cut through it. Change the story, change your life. So I just personally don't believe it. And I work with people on both sides of the aisle, I always have. I work with people I think are good and strong people. If the president called me, I'll work with him. It wasn't my selection, and he knows that. President Obama just reached out to me the other day. I'm going to go work with President Obama. I work all over the sides of the aisle because I'm working as an American towards solutions. I'm tired of the story of how bad it is. I'm tired of it's going to be the end of the world. It's stupid. It's ignorant. And it certainly, a therapist should hold himself to a higher standard than to participate in that in their own life, because how the hell are you going to lead somebody else if you're thinking the world is in such a bad shape because of somebody else being in charge? Here's the good news. I asked George W. Bush, I had a lunch with him one day, and I asked him, and this is, after his brother had obviously, been defeated and dropped out. And I said, how do you feel with the election? And I always respected that he never attacked President Obama. He was a class act, whether you like George Bush or not. And I also brought him out to speak, and virtually everyone in the room, and I'd say 2/3 were not George Bush supporters, at the end were like, this man is different than I saw through the media. I understand why he made some decisions. I may not agree with them all, but I understand why. I no longer think of him as evil. But I asked him about that, and he said, Tony, here's what I can tell you. He said, I remember when I was a kid when Nixon was kicked out of office, and I thought, he destroyed the presidency forever. It's over. He said, he didn't destroy the presidency. He said, here's what I've learned. He goes, would this be the guy I'd pick? He said, I think you know the answer is no. He said, but I'll tell you this. He said, the office is bigger than the occupant. And I think it's important for people to remember that. The office is bigger than the occupant. It doesn't matter who's in that place. There are things that are going to be dealt with. You're going to agree with them or you're going to disagree with them. But the smart thing to do is focus on what you can control, not what you can't. As long as people focus on what I always tell people there's 3 tests of focus. If I asked you right now watching, do you tend to focus more on what you control or can't control? You know, it's interesting. Rooms are split when you ask that question, right? If you're always focused on what you can't control, you're going to be stressed. And the next second question I asked, do you focus on what you have or what's missing? The vast majority of people focus on what's missing. If you're always focused on what's missing and what you can't control, you're going to be angry or depressed or frustrated. We don't have to go any further. I can give you Prozac all day long, and you're still going to be, you might be numb, but you're still going to be angry and frustrated. We haven't dealt with the origin of the problem. Do you tend to focus more on the past, the present, or the future? We all do all 3. But if your focus is mostly on the past, which you can't change, and what you can't control, and what's missing in your life, I ask people in my rooms all the time, 10,000 people in the room, and I'll say, how many of you know somebody that is taking antidepressants and is still depressed? 95% of the room raises their hand. Most people know people that have 2 or 3 drugs and they're still depressed. That ought to tell us that the problem is not the external world. And the problem is not just biochemistry. The problem is the software that's running this process. And you can't change somebody else's software if you don't change your own. You can't help someone get to solutions you can't change your own. So I'm able to help people in this area because I don't participate in the bullshit. I don't do it. Do I like everything I see? Of course not. Do I have my opinions of how life should be? Of course. Then there's how life is. And then it's like being pragmatic and saying, how do I, in this environment, continue to add value to people's lives? How do I make sure that I have a joyous life for myself and my family? How do I help those that are less fortunate than myself, regardless of what's happening in the external environment? I think that is a more empowering approach, at least for me.
Yeah. Great.
Other than that, I have no feelings about it.
I feel I've been passionate, man. I feel energized. There is hope in the world. So, thank you so much. Tony is going to be at this year's Networker Symposium in Washington, D.C. He'll be talking on March 23rd, a special session at the conference. We're very fortunate, very grateful that you're coming in and you really want to get your message across to therapists. What a fun thing to do, to talk with you and to be in the energy field. Enjoyed it so much.
Thank you, Rich. Great to see you again.
Give me a Robbins hug here.
You got it, buddy.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great seeing you again.
Great.